So I just came from a networking event and I had a woman ask me, "What's your sign?" And I was like, "Are you serious? Do I look naive? Do I look like I believe in that vague pseudoscience bullshit?" Come on. Actually, I do. And I use it to build stronger relationships. And I'm going to show you how. Before I show you how, I'm going to give you a riddle that kind of proves my points of how astrology works at the end. So be sure to watch to the end of the video. So here's the riddle. I have a baseball hat. And I want you to tell me what type of baseball hat you think I have. I got this hat last year in the fall. I live in Chicago, spend most of my time on the north side. And my dad hangs a W flag off of his porch every time the Cubs win. So what I want you to do is write down what type of hat you think I have, and then write down how sure you are that you're right. Meaning, like, would you put $100 on it? $200? If I could double your money, $1,000? And then I'll show you how that ties into astrology at the end. But first, let's deal with the elephant in the room, which is astrology is a pseudoscience. A pseudoscience is a science that has no evidence behind it. And all progressive science is pseudoscience. I mean, it was less than 100 years ago that it was totally new to us that our subconscious controls most of our actions. And furthermore, 100 years ago, if you said that there was just this wireless wave in the air that gives you all of the information of mankind at your fingertips and tried to explain that to someone 100 years ago, they would call you a witch and they wouldn't believe it because they just wouldn't be able to wrap their mind around it. Although you could show evidence that it's working, you can't really explain how it's working, but you know that it is. It would be extremely frustrating. And I also want you to recognize, pseudoscience, every 99.999 of science is wrong, because the only science that's right is the science that exists right now. At first we thought that the atom was the smallest molecule that there was, and then all of a sudden, nope, sorry guys, we were wrong. There's something smaller. And then we thought that, okay, once we get down to that quark level, well, then actually, once you go smaller than that, you go into this quantum world where every law that we thought and knew to be possible seems to not exist. Science always progresses. So science is less fact, because everything ultimately gets disproven. So what science is it's like a calculated assumption of observing patterns, okay? So all science is an assumption of what you think happened because of observing certain patterns. And then there's a method to go about this where you gain a conclusion and you build your evidence until it's proven wrong again. Biology started out as a pseudoscience. And we used to think that putting leeches on us and drilling holes in our head was medicine. No, it's not. Now you take a pill and all types of different chemical reactions happen in your body. 200 years ago, that's witchcraft. That's pseudoscience. But today we know it to be true. So the same thing goes with psychology. Psychology is the study of people's behaviors and their thoughts and the interaction they have with their emotions and their actions. And we make assumptions. You might get diagnosed as depressed because you're really lethargic and you're tired and you seem to be down all the time. But again, that's an assumption because it could be a thyroid problem too. But as science gets better, the assumptions get more precise. But as we go up this ladder of science, of we've got physics, right, and then biology. And then we have psychology, and physics is the most concrete, thing that we know, the least amount of assumption. Then biology, there's still some shit that we don't know yet, especially about the human brain, but still figuring it out. But again, some assumption. Then psychology starts widening up because now we're dealing with people's emotions and feelings and stuff like that. So there's even more assumption. And then we go into the science of sociology, where we're making even larger assumptions. If you're to make a phone call to New York, you'd pick up and say, hello? Now, if you were making a phone call to Mexico, you would say, hola. Now, does that mean that the person in New York doesn't speak Spanish and the person that is in Mexico City speaks English? No, they could, but it's a good general assumption that they do based on their location. You can make an assumption that if you're 50 years old and I've got tickets to James Taylor or tickets to Justin Bieber, I can make a pretty safe assumption of which ones that you would like. Now, does that mean that there's no 50-year-olds at a Justin Bieber concert and no 18-year-olds at a James Taylor concert? No, but they're safe assumptions to make. So again, based on location, based on energetic influence of the things around you, the time period, the culture, the physical location, you can gain these generalizations that start shaping who this person is. And understanding a person is about understanding their biology, the way they look, the way that they dress, the way how old they are, what their body looks like. You can gain information on those assumptions. And once again, just assumptions. You could take a look at their social media and see their psychology and see like what type of things do they post. Are they more happy? Is it a little bit more morbid? Is it like, what are the things that are on their mind? And you can start making assumptions about that person. And then you look at their sociology. Where are they from? Where did they grow up? Where did they go to college? Where do they spend their free time? Who are the 5 people that they hang out with the most? What type of books are they reading? What type of things do they do on the weekend? And once you collect that information, you start getting this idea of who this person is based on the vibrational influence of their surroundings having the effect on their genetics to turn them into that person. Well, if living 1,000 miles from one place to the next place can completely change your tastes in food, your language, how you treat people, I can go on, then where giant celestial bodies like planets and the sun, where they're positioned relative to you, it has some effect. The closer something is to you, the more of an effect that it has on you, okay? And that's what astrology is about. Like, when you talk about your zodiac sign, it's where is the sun located in the skies when you were born, and then how does that affect your energy, okay? And again, it's just people say that it's vague. Well, yes, it's just a generalization that you use to get this picture in your head of who this person is so you can communicate with them better. You can empathize with them better. There's no person that you can't love once you know their story. And to know someone's story, you have to dive in deep to everything, to their biology, psychology, sociology, and astrology. And so people say, okay, well, all right, fine, it has an effect, but it doesn't have that much of an effect. And really, does the sun really give a shit that I'm ambitious? Well, the thing is most people who bash astrology bash it from the level of a complete ignorant person, like someone who doesn't know anything about it. They say, oh, because the sun was in this position, now that means I'm ambitious or trustworthy or indecisive or whatever. And it doesn't go that way. So like astrology is practiced more than just in horoscopes and in zodiac signs. In fact, astrology can be the study of places and how the planets affect the culture over time. It can be used to find the right location for something. This sounds a little bit weird, but we already do it. Like farmers change the way that they, like the timing of their crops based on the location of the sun. We change our behaviors based on the location of the sun. If it's 125 degrees out, trust me, the conversations in the city are more directed towards the sun. It's a safe assumption to make. And when it's in winter and it's freezing cold out, you're outside less. It controls your actions. When the sun is in this position, I go outside more. When the sun is in that position, I stay inside. Now this makes sense because we receive this through our ability to sense temperature. But what if you couldn't sense temperature, but it still had that effect on you? The sun also affects you emotionally Because in the winter, when there's not as much sun out, people get clinically depressed. And that's science, that the rays of the sun give us energy and happiness. And when it's not there, it has an emotional effect on us. So the position of the sun affects us emotionally. It affects our actions and our behaviors. It affects our conversations, and it affects our decisions and our timing of things. So when you say that the placement of the sun affects your consciousness on an emotional and a characteristic level, if you can't understand that, that just means that you're not in tune with the way that consciousness receives those type of vibrations. But it doesn't mean that it's not true. All vibrations are affected by all other vibrations. It's just a matter of whether you have the apertures to receive it. So astrology isn't just, okay, what month were you born? Oh, it goes deeper than that. Let me show you a real astrological chart. This is probably how you're most familiar with a zodiac sign chart. You see that there are 12 different type of zodiac signs, and each one of these represents where the sun is when you are born. And within these 12 categories, there are 30 degrees. So it's 360 degrees, about the same amount of days there are in a year. And each one of those degrees means something slightly different, but you can scope out similar that you do in months. June is different than May, May is different than April, April is different than March, but March 15th is only slightly more different than March 21st, which is the first day of spring. They're very close together, but there is a point that denotes one section from the next. But still, this is very vague. All this considers is where the influence of the sun is relative to you when you're born. But it goes so much deeper than that. That's only one ingredient of the soup. And so if I put potatoes in a soup, it is a potato soup, but not all potato soups are the same. It could be a cream-based soup. It could be a broth-based soup. It could be, you could put meat in there. You could put fruit in there. It doesn't matter. The more ingredients that you are aware of, the better you can define the soup. So this is the same thing with a real astrological chart. There's more that goes into it than where the sun was when you were born. So where was the sun on, you could see here on a real birth chart, where was the sun on in the day and the month? Also, where was the solar system in that year? Also, what time were you born during the day and what location were you born? I was born in Chicago at about 1:10. When you do an astrological chart like this, it gives you a lot more detail. So it's going to tell you about the sun in Aries and what generalizations that comes with that. Where the sun was, where the moon was, where Jupiter was, and where all of what attributes come with that gravitational influence of those planets. So you can see that there's more ingredients of this soup than just the potatoes. It's where the sun is in Aries, but the moon is in Aquarius, and Mercury is in Taurus, and Venus is in Taurus. And this chart ends up looking like this. And you can see here, it says the sun is in Aries at 17.22. So what that means is Aries has 30 degrees of areas of places that it could be, and right when I was born, it was 17.22. You start getting way more precise. Mastery is equal to the level of detail that you deem to be significant. And when you're practicing astrology by just saying, oh, I was born in April, so I'm in Aries, that's not a very high level of mastery. And if you're trying to perform high levels of reading into people and using just that one metric, that it's so stupid. Again, it's like trying to generalize a human being because they live in China instead of India. Like there's some generalizations, but the nuances of that person you have to go into the detail of their situation in order to get more information. And that's the way that an astrological chart generally works. Now, we see this and then we get upset when we see things like this, like never play an Aries, never second guess a Taurus, never change a Gemini, never false hope a Cancer. When people write these things, what they're doing is they're taking this type of general information and making wide assumptions, similar to
New Yorkers are a little bit rude. Midwesterners are a little more polite. People on the West Coast are a little bit more relaxed. Those are super generalizations, but they make a little bit of sense. Same way that Tauruses are a little bit stubborn and Virgos are very calculated and detail oriented. There's exceptions to all of this, and as you dive into the details, it reveals more specific assumptions.
So astrology merely plays a role in making these assumptions and getting to better understand who this person is on all these levels. The reason that people balk at astrology is because we don't really value spirituality, because we don't understand spirituality. But spirituality, the study of the soul, of consciousness, it is real because you're alive and you are conscious, although we don't understand it. So all of these spiritual sciences will continue to be considered pseudosciences until technology catches up and proves that it's just like everything else, just like psychology, just like sociology, just like biology and physics. Will it ever be to the point where it's as definitive as we know physics? Well, physics is a much lower vibration. It's gravity, it's matter, it's stuff like that. And as we go higher and higher on levels of the vibration, it becomes harder to prove things. But nevertheless, there is a system and it does matter and it does have an effect. So whenever I'm trying to connect deeper with a client and really get to know them, I take a look at their biology, their health. I take a look at their psychology. I take a look at their sociology, their friend group, their belief system. And I take a look at their astrology. And I get details on that too. And through all of that kind of like dossier of information, I'm able to position myself to say, how can I best love this person? Because whether you want to admit it or not, all energy has an effect on all other energy. And when you have vibrational influence, it changes who you are. It changes who you are in a way that is almost predictable. So it's a calculated assumption, just like the other sciences. And if you can use assumptions through a number of different lenses to make a confident decision, then that is useful. Now, I'm from Chicago. I'm 34 years old. I bought a baseball hat last year, and my dad hangs up a W banner every time the Cubs win. I got a hat last fall, 2016. What type of hat do I have? And if you guessed the Cubs hat, you would be right. Seems almost obvious, right? But all I did was gave you a bunch of assumptions. If I said I have a baseball hat, I live in the U.S. What is it? Probably wouldn't be able to get it. If I said I live in Chicago, you might get it because we got the White Sox too. But as I give you more context, more assumptions that you get to shape those together, you can start to say, I'm rather confident that you made the choice of buying a Cubs hat. The point is that all energy has influence on all other energy. And the bigger that energy is and the more consistent and sustained it is, the more of an effect that it has on everything else. If you only used someone's biology, the way they looked, to judge their character, you're gonna be off a lot judging a book by its cover. If all you used was their social media to see their psychology, the way that they talk and all of that, you still might be off. If you use sociology, where it's just like, okay, where did they go to school? Who do they hang out with? You still can be off a little bit. But when you use, and if you use astrology and you're like, oh, he's a Virgo, well, then this isn't gonna work. You're also a fool. We never know anything for sure, ever. That's the joy of being a human. The way it works is use the tools and all of the modalities of consciousness, everything from spiritual to physical, and make the best assumptions you can so you can create at will. So that's why I use astrology as part of my way to better understand people and connect deeper in my relationships. So the next time someone asks you if you believe in astrology, you gotta let them know that there's nothing to believe. It's, do you understand it?